How's your bracket, John?
Oh, I don't think it's very good. I did end up filling one out about 30 minutes before tip off on Thursday. I think, let's see, I lost St. John's. That's the only Elite Eight team that I've lost.
Mm-hmm.
Got all my Final Four teams still in there, so that's okay. That's okay. Um, I'm not gonna lie. I did go a fair amount of chalk this year, more so than usual, and that ended up being the right play. So I'm doing okay overall.
I'm with you. I'm at 99.5%. And St. John's is the only team that I lost. Now, I lost that entire Sweet 16 matchup. I had St. John's and Missouri playing, and St. John's going to take on the Gators in the Elite Eight. But Texas Tech and Arkansas are the only two I missed. I got every other Sweet 16 team right. So clearly, all my Elite Eight teams are still in there. And I'm with you, John. I went. I would say, I mean, obviously to this point, pretty chalky, and beyond the Sweet 16, it's fairly chalky with the exception of two. I got Michigan upsetting Auburn, and I've got Purdue upsetting Houston.
See, I had Purdue losing in the first round, and High Point wasn't that far off. Now High Point gave them a game.
Mm-hmm.
I had High Point versus McNeese State in the round of 32, so I wasn't too far off there.
Well, Purdue is, gosh, you can Purdue. I don't know, maybe Purdue and Maryland. If you're going by seeds, they've had maybe the easiest road, if you will, McNeese and High Point for the Boilermakers. I mean, it gets real now with Houston, obviously. Maryland had to go through Grand Canyon, and of course they had to have a buzzer beater to beat Colorado State, which was that weird. I was talking to Bill and Preston about this morning when you summarized the tournament, and Bill was like, "Yo, I thought we've seen great basketball." And he's not wrong. I actually agree with that. I think there's been a bunch of great basketball, but the fringe fan turns into March Madness for the unpredictability of it, right? And you haven't had the 14s over the 3s and the 15s over the 2s and you've certainly had some upsets, but it hasn't been widespread. There hasn't been a ton of buzzer beaters and crazy things like that. I do think, though, entering the Sweet 16 now with like the best teams in the country still playing, John, I think we'll probably be in for quite the weekend here in a couple of days.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. We always figure out a way for the tournament to impress us, and it may not be a whole slew of upsets this year, but in the end, we're basically always like, okay, yeah, that was pretty damn fun for the month. So something will happen to where everybody will be on the edge of their seats.
7 SEC teams are in the Sweet 16. 7. It's the most ever. I think that's a great. I know that 7 also lost, and I get that. And those that hate the SEC, they're going to point that out. But 7 are also in the Sweet 16. I think it's played out exactly like I thought it would. There'd be some teams that would fall because it's the tournament, and then the better teams in the league would win, and then maybe 1 or 2 of the hotter teams would win, and that's Arkansas. Arkansas right now is kind of on a roll, and the rest of them are just all really damn good.
Yeah, and it's a pretty impressive number to get that many teams through. You look back in the record that was broken was the ACC when they got 6, and I believe they had seven teams in the tournament that year. So, which is more impressive? Honestly, I probably lean towards that ACC mark, but at the same time, it's like the league was so good all throughout the year, and to have 7 of the teams in the Sweet 16, that really shows, the depth of the league and how good it was. Because, like you said, there were a few upsets, and then there's some teams out there who are really showing what the SEC is made of. But a couple of these teams have played some pretty tight games too. So, maybe a couple of those ones look a little bit more vulnerable than others from the SEC. But it's been I've enjoyed watching the league play in this tournament.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I've got the Gators winning the whole thing, like a lot of people in the country. So, 5 SEC teams lost in the first round, 1 lost in the first 4, and then A&M lost in the second round. For anybody wondering, the teams that are out where they went, that's where they went. John, that's the fun stuff. Now to the not so fun stuff. 35-9, Gamecocks outscored in Fayetteville this weekend, outmatched, outmanned, out everything. I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, this is not in any way, shape, or form to come off as anything that nears any sort of excuse. But Arkansas is really, really good. Their offense, I would say, if there is a question mark with the Hogs, like can they win at all type question, it would probably be with the starting pitching. I'm not saying that it's bad or weak, but compared to years past, I would say that would probably be the one thing that you would look at and say, I don't know. But all those guys are really good too. Offensively, they're just flat out loaded. And Derek made a comment on the air yesterday about the Aloy brothers. He said, all that NIL money they've got, they need to invest in a chiropractor, because I mean, they just take some hacks. All of them do. You got a bunch of veteran hitters in that lineup, John. Tennessee's going to come to town this weekend. Of course, they got something very, very similar to it. But for a team that largely, for the last few years, you look at Arkansas, they play defense, they pitch really well, and offense has kind of been the question. That is not a question mark with this team. Carolina had their hands full, and obviously the Razorbacks proved it.
Yeah, and I think they made a change this past offseason from a hitting coach standpoint, so maybe that has something to do with it. But they brought in a whole slew of new players as well. I mean, their team is like, I mean, they had the number 1 transfer portal class in the country, and a lot of it is because of talent, but a lot of it is because of the numbers too. I mean, they brought in a crazy amount of transfers, but regardless, they're just better than South Carolina. I think folks are getting really fired up out there, and I understand. But I'm choosing not to get like crazy fired up over what happened this past weekend or what's about to come this coming weekend, because those two teams are just that much more talented than South Carolina. And, should that be the case? No. But is that the case this season? Yes. It comes down to after the season, whether you believe you have the right pieces in place in the right spots to be able to get the program back to competing. But this team's just not going to be competitive with the top end teams in the league. And I won't say can't be competitive. They're not going to win many games against the elite of the elite in the league. They're just not good enough this year to beat Arkansas and Tennessee. And I'll reserve judgment on in like strong emotion when South Carolina's playing teams that is pretty close to like in talent with. Like, I mean, we talked last week about how disappointing that series against Oklahoma was, and I try not to pull any punches on my thoughts on what happened last weekend after the game against the Sooners. And because that's a game that's a series that South Carolina should be pretty like talent with. And you have them at home and you had them dead to rights and you didn't finish it off because you play so poorly in the back third of the game. But this past weekend against Arkansas, this upcoming weekend against Tennessee, they're just so much better than South Carolina. It's not it to me, it's just not worth being really upset over the results over.
Yeah, Oklahoma did win their series at home this weekend against Mississippi State. They are 20-3 overall, and 4-2 in the SEC for what that's worth for fans that are following along with that Sooners team. Yeah, so John, I mentioned something a little while ago, and I wasn't. I haven't talked to anybody. This is just critical thinking when it comes to how you resolve some issues. Clearly, the pitching is right now, I would say mostly questionable at best. They certainly have some guys who are performing at a nice high level, and then they have a lot of guys I think that they expect more out of. and they have some guys just haven't been very good. What do you think I mean, you had the bizarre incident on Saturday with Eskew getting hit in the head during batting practice. And it goes into concussion protocol. So they have to move Jarvis up, who was scheduled to start tomorrow against the Tar Heels. So you knew he was going to probably be on a pitch count anyways. But looking at not looking past North Carolina, we're going to talk about them in just a second, but looking ahead to the setup of the rotation, do you anticipate they will continue to stay with announcing a 3-man rotation, a weekend rotation, a full weekend rotation? Or do you think that because of some of the challenges that they have had and that they're going to face, that maybe they at least consider the idea of throwing a TBA in there and using a guy where necessary, if needed on Friday? Not saying that he wouldn't start on. They might say this is our rotation, but publicly we're going to tell you that it's TBA because we might need to use this guy on Friday or on Saturday. Do you think there's anything like that would or maybe should be considered?
I mean, certainly should be. Certainly should be. I mean, I think to get a little bit ahead of you in your question, I don't think that Dylan Eskew will be ready for tomorrow night because I'm about 95% sure I'm right on this. When you go into concussion protocol, there are certain steps that you have to hit certain days away from when you were diagnosed with a concussion. And I don't think that it's possible for him to have been diagnosed on, even if it was Saturday, he may have been diagnosed on Sunday. I don't think it's possible for him to hit the benchmarks that are required so many days out from being diagnosed with that concussion to be able to pitch on Tuesday. Now, I would hope that he could get back for Friday, and you just go ahead and make that change. Just go ahead and insert him back into that Friday spot into the rotation. And, you know, you have Brandon Stone coming back out of the bullpen where he was obviously better at that time. And then McCoy on Saturday. And then I would go with TBA on Sunday, as you alluded to, with the thought that Jarvis Evans probably goes. But if you need him at another time, then you pitch him at another time, because as I was saying, like, I don't have high expectations for this upcoming weekend on how competitive South Carolina is going to be. But if you're in position to win a game for whatever reason, whether you've had phenomenal pitching and scratched across a couple or what have you, like, you've got to go all out to win that game. That's just the way I see it. So if you need to throw Jarvis Evans on a Friday or a Saturday, then by all means go for it. But I don't know that you want to pitch him certainly in a starting role, but maybe not even in a long relief role before Sunday, because you've already bumped him up a couple of times now, and he's already thrown a ton of pitches. So, you know, I would anticipate either just a couple of innings on Friday or Saturday, or, you know, a close to normal start on Sunday. But I don't think you really need to climb him up much higher than 60 or 70 next Sunday.
Yeah, you know, right. I'm with you there. I hear you. And the Eskew deal, Eskew's a really interesting case study, isn't he, John? Because, you know, the conversation that generally, even if it wasn't how the conversation started, it always turns to the amount of guys that he puts on base via the walk or the HBP. And that is a very important piece of it, because in the SEC, you do that too much, they're going to burn you. There's no question. The other side of this coin, he's given up 4 runs all year. You know, so he has worked through it all. And so we can sit here and bitch and moan and argue about walks and this, that, and the other all we want to. And I'm not saying I'm okay with it. Nobody is, let alone Terry Rooney and Paul Maneri. That is very frustrating to him. These 4 and 5 inning outings for Dylan Eskew could be 5, 6, and 7 inning outings if he didn't have so many bases on balls. But he has not left one game this year where the team was just getting their rear ends kicked. They've been in position to win every single game that he has pitched in. Clemson, Oklahoma, all of them. So sometimes it's just what you got. and if he's ready to go on Friday night, regardless of how many dudes he's been putting on base, you got to roll the dice with the guy that's giving you a chance to win.
Yeah, and you're right. He's had a little bit of help from the bullpen to get out of some trouble with inherited runners. But you're exactly right. I mean, at the end of the day, there haven't been many runs that have crossed against him. But you're also about to start facing some teams that are much more capable of scoring those guys than maybe some of the others they face. So, you're playing with fire. But I agree with your point. And for me, when things are going poorly, I go back to at least what I think I know and what I felt good about, in a specific moment. Like Paul Mainieri felt really good about Dylan Eskew coming into this season. Right. And obviously things aren't lining up right, but they won some games back when he was a Friday starter. So, if I'm him, and I'm looking to kind of try to reset some things. Like that's one thing I kind of look towards is, maybe they need Dylan. Maybe this team needs Dylan on a Friday night to go out there and do what he does. And, I don't know that that's a great answer, but it might be the best answer for this team this week. And we'll see how he progresses through this concussion protocol. It's not guaranteed that he hits all his benchmarks. I mean, it may be a more serious concussion than we know about. I mean, who knows? I mean, we'll see if he's even available to go this upcoming weekend at any point. So, it's just not a great situation for South Carolina right now in any sense of the word.
How about the freshmen, John? KJ Scobey and Beau Hollins. Beau gets the ball up and out of there yesterday. It was about time, and he's hit a few of them this year that he just had the bad luck of the baseball gods against him. But he got one out of there yesterday. Scobey had 4 or 5 hits, I think, this weekend in the 4 hole, if I'm correct on that, a 3 or 4 hole. Youth can get you in trouble, certainly in the SEC, but these guys, they are impressive. And if that's the future of this team, maybe Gavin Braylon, the future back there behind the plate. I know that people were focused on the here and now, and I get it. I totally get it. But these young guys, they have gone in and done everything they've been asked to do. I tell you what, John, you could probably figure it out better than me. KJ Scobey is an elite third baseman. There is no when they told us that, they weren't lying. I mean, some of these plays that he makes that the common fan just looks at as they should be made every time, they are not that easy. I mean, one of the balls he came up yesterday and threw off his right, ended up throwing it off his right foot, and it was a dart on a bunt, I think is what it was. That's not an easy play. Your body's going that way and you're throwing it that way, and it was a missile. Mm-hmm. These guys have been very, very, very impressive.
Yeah, and those are the things that give you hope that not only for next year, but like later this year. Like Paul Mainieri's talked a lot about how, his teams tend to get better, and play their best baseball at the end of the year. And, I think that was largely true at LSU. We'll see if that happens at South Carolina. But those are the kind of players that give you hope that it will, right? Like, KJ is only going to keep getting better. Beau Hollins is only going to keep getting better. I mean, if you're a freshman, like to get better, you have to play. And that's what they're doing. Scobey's obviously started the whole year. Hollins, I think, is going to be in there, maybe not every day, but a lot, upcoming and maybe every day. So, those guys are going to keep improving. I'm not going to sit here and promise that they're going to be 300 hitters with double-digit home runs, but they're going to keep getting better. And that's what South Carolina needs is guys in the lineup who continue to elevate their game a little bit. And a couple of guys are doing that. A couple of guys are slumping a little bit, but they need more production from an offensive and defensive standpoint. I mean, defense again was something that hurt South Carolina this past weekend again. That's not something I was anticipating particularly coming into the season. I thought this would be a really, really good defensive team, and they haven't been awful, but they haven't been quite to the level that I thought. And, some plays that should have been made and aren't errors were not. It just hasn't been particularly clean. defensively, and that's not something that I was really anticipating coming into this.
Yeah, and it's simple stuff, that's been kind of mind-boggling. I mean, going back to last weekend, certainly this weekend, I don't know what the answer short is, John. I mean, Henry Kazmar is like 9 of 21 or something like that at the plate in SEC play, 9 of 21 or 9 of 22 or something. Either way, he's hovered around 400, I think, in league play, which is great. I mean, he had slumped offensively, and he's kind of picked it up a little bit. Defensively, inconsistent, I guess is what I would call it. I know Tippett had a interesting moment there on a tailor-made double play that certainly would have helped the Gamecocks. And that didn't work out. I don't know what they do at that position. These guys, I know they're trying as hard as they possibly can, but there just hadn't seemed to be an answer over there.
Yeah, and I'm with you. Like, typically I lean towards defense at shortstop, and neither one of them are playing great right now. I mean, Tippett doesn't look very confident to me right now, just in the way he's moving from a defensive standpoint. And Kazmar's got to be in his head at this point. But he's, as you mentioned, he's doing better offensively. I mean, I don't know that you don't try Jordan Carey on there at some point, but but you say that in one breath, and then it's like, well, who do you play at second? Well, there's really not anybody who's really capable of playing second right now. Nolan Araki didn't make the trip this past weekend to Arkansas, and he wasn't active against Oklahoma the week before. He's back to having some knee problems again, and they rushed him back from that injury way too quickly, and feeling the ill effects of that now. So I don't know what the answer is. I mean, Henry Kazmar is a good defensive shortstop, and he's shown that here this year, but he's made some really dumb, uncharacteristic plays defensively too. So I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I think you have to keep riding with Kazmar with the hopes that, he gets past this defensive hiccup, because you need some guys offensively too, and he's been swinging the bat so well lately. It's a really hard decision to make on where to go at that position.
You mentioned carry on, and something happened yesterday that we talked about Friday. I talked to Coach Lake about this, and sometimes John, think about what carry on has been doing offensively over the last couple of weeks, right? He's been pretty special offensively, and he's been pretty special defensively. Again, the ninth inning aside against Oklahoma, he's been very, very reliable out there. Great hands, great footwork. He's looked good. And I, we were talking about the 2-hole on Friday with Coach Lake, and I said, sometimes you think that maybe this is an answer, and then you make that change. We saw this a lot under Coach Kingston, and it compounds a problem. You're trying to solve one problem, and then you create another issue. And I'm not saying that this was just one game, John. So I don't really want to, let's not put the cart way ahead, the horse way ahead of the cart, whatever that saying is. But carry on looked, I thought, uncomfortable in the 2-hole yesterday, and he ended up being, I think he was 0 for 5 in the ball game. Prior to that, his swings looked just a lot better. Some guys are just comfortable hitting down in the lineup, but that's my thoughts. We bring you on here to ask you about your thoughts. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Jordan's probably a bottom of the order hitter. I felt that way and thought, as soon as they put him up in the 2-hole, he'll go 3 for 4 with a double and, make me look stupid. And, I still could happen. Like, I don't know that a 1-game sample size is good in baseball, not really, for anything. And, if you think that that's a move that you should make, then I think that's a move that you should try for 3 or 4 games to see where it goes. Now, I mean, it may not be real fair to have those 3 or 4 games be against the pitching staffs that you're going to see over those 3 or 4 games. But, I think you've got to be prepared if you're going to do something like that to give it a little bit of time to breathe and, see if it comes to life or not. But ultimately, I think he's a bottom third of the order hitter. but he certainly, I'll say this, based on what he's done, he deserves the opportunity to show that he's more than that. But for me, what kind of back to what I said about Dylan Eskew, when I'm in those times of crisis, for lack of a better word, I kind of go back to what I think I know and what I originally thought. And, I'd try to put Kazmar back up there and try that. That would be my move if I didn't feel just like moving Ethan Petrie up. I mean, stack Ethan Petrie and Nathan Hall right there. I don't know. I don't want to give the impression right now, especially because, like I said earlier, it's Arkansas and Tennessee coming up, and they're just better than South Carolina. I don't want to make it sound like it's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, because I don't think it's at that point. But you've kind of got the hand that you're dealt in terms of how good some of these players are, and what their talents lend them to do. And I don't see any like clear obvious solutions of things that just make things better overnight. Some guys are going to have to grow into some roles and just continue to try to play better for things to turn around a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, not trying to have a bunch of knee-jerk reactions around here. I'm not really like that, but at least creating the conversation to try to figure out what the answer might be. One final quick one here. Brendan Sweeney, and I want to give him a little bit of grace, because I thought his outing at Oklahoma was very special, and he was extended, and he just really ran out of gas. But still, when you add the numbers up, you go back, I'm looking at him now, Clemson, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. And again, you have some grace here, but also yesterday he couldn't even record an out. You're talking about 3 1/3 innings pitched, and he's allowed 10 hits and 8 earned runs in those 3 contests. John, he's supposed to be the closer, and he's had some nice moments in different games this year, but against those 3 opponents, it hadn't really gone his way. Do you think that that's something that's under evaluation?
It's got to be. I mean, it's got to be, and I'm not sure where his velocity went. I mean, in the scrimmages, he was throwing 95, 96, and I'm pretty sure he touched a couple of 97s, if I'm not confusing him with somebody else. And I just haven't seen that same velocity since we got into the season, and I don't know what the reason for that is. He's a fastball changeup kind of pitcher, and if you're not throwing one of those pitches for a strike, then that makes things challenging, and I don't think he's throwing quite enough strikes to be effective in that role. So I mean, some of these guys who I've thought might have an opportunity to get a look at the back end of the game, just haven't been quite as good either. I mean, Zach Russell's one, and he had a tough go of it against College of Charleston the other day, but he was good against Arkansas the other day and has been good every other time out. So I don't know what the answer with that one is. Like I thought when you eventually moved Jarvis Evans into the rotation, like you take a look at Ryder Guarino, but he had a really tough day yesterday. Some of these answers aren't quite as clear as maybe what we were thinking, or options maybe aren't quite as clear as what we were thinking initially. But Sweeney's job has got to be under evaluation too, just like basically everybody else is on this team.
Yeah, and let me be fair to him. I said 10 hits, 8 hits, but he has also walked 5 guys, and that's I do think the strikes are an issue. He was getting behind guys yesterday. I thought, that ain't good, and it wasn't. We'll see. What do you make of the SEC right now, John? For those maybe fringe paying attention, you look at the top: Arkansas and Tennessee at 5-1. That's not a shocker. But did anybody see what the Georgia Bulldogs did to Florida this weekend? The Gators and the Aggies, 2 preseason top 3 teams, haven't won a game. They are a combined 0-12 in the SEC.
That's crazy. The bottom of the standings are just kind of as crazy as the top. Mississippi State was supposed to challenge for Omaha this year. They're down at 1-5. Also, I don't think most folks thought that South Carolina was going to be competing to go to Omaha this year. So them being at 1-5 and Missouri being at 0-6 isn't like crazy surprising. But Texas A&M, Florida, Mississippi State being down there having won a combined, one game out of 18 is just kind of crazy to me. It's a strange start to the year in the league for sure. And Florida's dealing with a bunch of injuries right now, so they've got a little bit of an excuse. Texas A&M had the one big injury at the beginning of the year, but they got a new head coach that the players installed last off season, and maybe that one's not going to work out because they got talent for days on that team. But very, very odd start to league play in some instances. But it's 2 out of 10 so far, and still a long way to go for the league. And I know that Florida is going to bounce back to some degree. Texas A&M's too talented to not get out of the cellar. That's for sure. I'm not saying they're going to be competing for a championship, but I think they'll be right in the mid pack of the league by the time this thing comes to an end. But right now it's off to a little bit of a crazy start, which is part of the reason why I don't really pay too much attention to standings and stats until about the third or maybe fourth week of conference play. But you can't fall too far behind. You can't play your way out of anything, the first 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks or so of the league. And, the teams that are going to be sitting down there at 1 and 2 wins, they've got a tough road to hoe.
For anybody wondering, is Carolina totally out of everything? No, they're not. Obviously, they're going to have to win games, but they have 0 bad losses this year. Gamecocks are at 28th in the RPI, which is a really good number after what just happened this weekend. Got a quad 1 opportunity tomorrow night against North Carolina, where they've had a bunch of success against the Tar Heels up in Charlotte. Speaking of success, the softball program this weekend, John, they win another big-time series over Texas Tech. I know it slipped away yesterday. They were up 5-3, and the Red Raiders come back to take a 6-5 lead, and they hang on, and they salvage Game 3 of that series. But Ashley Chastain's team pitched their way to a couple of wins prior to 5-2 and 1-0 on Saturday over Texas Tech. They got Clemson tomorrow night at home at 6 o'clock, and her ladies are 24-6 right now, 2-4 in the SEC, and they head to Baton Rouge next weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big weekend for that team. I was at the game on Saturday and Sunday, so I wasn't. I was at the game on Saturday and Sunday, and that Sunday game was just weird the way it transpired. Technical difficulties early in the game, 10-minute delay, trying to figure out a replay review, and then the game ended. I don't know if you saw or other folks saw that they didn't play the bottom of the 7th inning because of a drop-dead curfew. Texas Tech had to hop on a flight to get back home, and they didn't get a chance to play the bottom of the 7th. Now they played the top of the 7th. If Texas Tech had gone up 2 runs or gone up a run, scored 2 runs in the top of the 7th to go up a run, then they would have reverted back to the 6th inning score, and South Carolina would have ended up winning. But anyway, they didn't get a chance to play the bottom of the 7th, the technically final in 6 innings. Disappointing to not get an opportunity, but I don't know that they were going to hit that Kennedy girl for the 2nd day in a row. That girl is something else. But talked to Ashley Chastain about tomorrow. She said, obviously, this is something that's crazy important to me, and I've got to balance everybody's emotions with trying to stay on process and understanding that if you try too hard, then you're not gonna play well. So she certainly understands everything about what this game tomorrow night is about, and they've got the Tigers tomorrow at 6 at Beckham Field, and I would expect that game be pretty darn close to every seat in the house be filled. it was a decent crowd this past weekend against number 12 Texas Tech, but hopefully tomorrow it's even better.
Yeah, Clemson swept Syracuse in Syracuse, New York. Where else would you rather be than Syracuse, New York in March? But they did go up there this weekend and they swept through them. I don't know how good Syracuse's team is, but Tigers come in at 24-9 and 6-3 in the ACC. Clemson had passed South Carolina in softball, but it doesn't look like that's the case anymore, obviously, with what the Gamecocks have been able to do. So hopefully tomorrow night it's a packed house out there. And hat tip to Coach Tanner. He's turning into quite the color analyst.